Welcome back to Chess Tactic today. In the Speed Chess Championship 2025, the calm genius Vincent Keymer faces the rock-solid tactician Wesley So in a deep, strategic showdown. What begins as a quiet English setup quickly turns razor-sharp, with precise calculation, bold pawn pushes, and tactical fireworks lighting up the board. Get ready for a masterclass in patience, pressure, and pure endgame brilliance. And we're off. Keymer opens with pawn to c4, the English opening. This is a sophisticated way to start the game, fighting for the center from the flank rather than occupying it directly. In response, Wesley So plays pawn to e6, a very flexible and solid reply, preparing to develop and challenge White's central control. Keymer follows up with pawn to b3. This signals a clear plan. He's going for a double fianchetto setup, aiming to control the long diagonals with his bishops, and so immediately stakes his claim in the center with pawn to d5. He's saying, if you won't occupy the center, I will. The first bishop comes to b2, a beautiful square where it will slice across the board. This is the heart of White's opening idea. Wow! An ambitious move from So. He pushes the pawn to d4, grabbing space and cramping White's style. This pawn will be a major feature of the game, a strength for Black, but also a potential target for White. Watch this pawn closely. White develops the knight to f3, immediately putting a question to that advanced d4 pawn. The battle lines are being drawn. So calmly defends, bringing his own knight out to c6. It's a natural, solid developing move that reinforces his central grip. Keymer continues with his plan, preparing to place his second bishop on g2. He's committing fully to this fianchetto structure, and so develops his bishop to c5, an active square, where it puts a little pressure on the f2 square and controls key territory. There it is, the bishop arrives on g2, and now White has two powerful bishops ready to influence the game from afar. The opening setup is complete. Black's knight comes to e7, a very flexible square, from where it can support the center or jump to g6 to join an attack. Keymer castles kingside, getting his king to safety. This is the end of the first chapter of the game. Both sides are developed, and the real fight is about to begin. And So follows suit, castling his king to safety as well. Now the middle game maneuvering can begin in earnest. Pawn to d3, a modest but important move, shoring up the center and preparing to challenge Black's d4 pawn. So plays pawn to a5, a great prophylactic move, preventing White from expanding on the queen side with b4 and preparing a little counterplay of his own. The knight on a3 looks a bit strange on the edge of the board, but it has a very clear destination, the b5 square, where it will be a real pest. Right away, Black expands in the center with pawn to e5. This move cements the d4 pawn and opens up lines for his pieces. The position is getting more complex. As planned, the knight lands on b5. It's a fantastic outpost, putting pressure on Black's position and restricting his pieces. A useful little move, pawn to h6. It prevents any annoying checks or knight jumps on g5 and gives the king a little breathing room. White plays pawn to a3, preparing to challenge Black's control on the queen side and getting ready to support a b4 push later. The rook comes to e8. This might look quiet, but it's a crucial preparatory move. That rook on the e-file is going to be a major player in the coming conflict. Keymer brings his rook to b1, another move preparing for the b4 pawn break. The queen side is heating up, and So develops his final minor piece. The bishop on f5 is perfectly placed, eyeing White's central pawns and adding to the pressure. An interesting bishop retreat. Keymer is repositioning this piece, perhaps to b2, where it will have more influence. And here we go! Wesley So strikes in the center with pawn to e4. This is a powerful, dynamic decision that blows the game wide open. He's challenging White to a tactical fight, and this move changes everything. The knight has to retreat, White's position is suddenly under pressure, and he has to be careful not to let Black's attack gain momentum. The knight jumps into the action at g6. It's heading towards the f4 square, where it could cause all sorts of problems for the White king. Keymer reroutes his knight to c2, a more useful square where it can help defend the center and support his queenside ambitions. The queen comes to d7, connecting the rooks and preparing to join the assault. All of Black's pieces are coordinating beautifully. White finally gets in the b4 pawn push, creating counterplay on the queen side. But is it too late? Black's central attack is looking very dangerous. So captures the pawn. This opens up the a-file, adding another dimension to the attack. White recaptures, and now we have open files on both sides of the board. The game is becoming a real brawl. Black captures on d3, liquidating the center. This trade has a huge consequence. It leaves White with a weak, isolated pawn on d3. White recaptures, but now that d3 pawn is a permanent weakness that Black will target for the rest of the game. A fantastic bishop retreat to f8. It looks passive, but from here it defends the king, supports the central pawns, and can re-emerge later. A masterful positional move. The bishop finally arrives on b2, joining its partner. White has his ideal setup, but Black's initiative is growing stronger. And just like that, Black's knight lands on e5, a monster square right in the heart of White's position. It puts immediate pressure on that weak d3 pawn. Keymer decides to take the pawn on d4. This is a very risky choice. He wins a pawn, but in doing so, he opens up his position and allows Black's pieces to flood in. Was it worth it? Let's see. And, of course, So's bishop takes on d3. This isn't just about winning the pawn back. It's about the crushing initiative Black now has. The tide has truly turned. White defends with the rook, but the position is already looking desperate. Black's pieces are swarming. Wesley So grabs another pawn on c4. That bishop is now a powerful attacker, cutting across the board and creating major threats. White captures the pawn on b7, but this feels like a sideshow. The real action is happening around the White king. So calmly brings his rook to d8, piling up the pressure on the d-file. Notice how all of Black's pieces are working together in perfect harmony. The storm is brewing. The bishop retreats to g2, trying to hold the position together. But Black's attack is relentless. An excellent move. So offers a trade of bishops. Why? Because White's fianchettoed bishop on g2 is a key defender. Trading it off will leave the White king dangerously exposed. The knight moves to e3, trying to block some of the threats, but it's not enough. Black gets the trade he wanted. The key defender is gone, and now the White king is all alone. The king recaptures, but it's now more vulnerable than ever. The real fireworks are about to begin. A brilliant pawn push. Pawn to c5 undermines the defense of the d4 square and opens the c-file for Black's bishop. This is tactical precision at its finest. White has no choice but to capture, further weakening his own pawn structure. The bishop lands on c5, and it's a terrifying sight for White. It hits the knight on e3 and stares directly at the exposed king. Keymer tries to consolidate with knight to f3, hoping to trade off some of the attacking pieces. But So simply increases the pressure. Queen to c6 attacks the knight and prepares to invade. The tension is unbearable. White defends with the queen. It seems like he might just be able to hold on. But what happens next is one of the most brilliant moves you will ever see. Oh my goodness! Rook to do! An absolutely stunning, unbelievable rook sacrifice. So throws his entire rook into the attack, and at first glance it looks like a blunder. But wait! This move completely shatters White's coordination. This is a thunderbolt from the blue that wins the game on the spot. A masterpiece of tactical vision. Keymer has to take the rook. There's no other choice. But this is exactly what So wanted. The queen is now deflected from the defense of the king. And here's the follow-up. Knight takes f3, a powerful check that continues the attack with devastating force. White's position is collapsing. White blocks with the queen, but the combination isn't over yet. The final blow is coming. Knight takes rook on e1 with check. This is the point of the whole combination. It's a royal fork, attacking the king and the queen. After this move, black is simply winning. The king moves out of check, but the damage is done. The tactical storm is past, and black is left with a decisive advantage. Queen takes queen. So simplifies the position, heading into a completely winning endgame. Knight recaptures. The smoke has cleared. Black is up a full exchange with a dominating knight on d3. From here on, it's a matter of technique. And the knight lands on d3, a monster piece that controls the entire board. This is the technical conversion phase of the game. White tries to create some semblance of a defense, but it's a hopeless task. So simply mops up another pawn. The material advantage is growing, and white's position is falling apart. The rook becomes active, but it's too little too late. Black's coordination is perfect. The knight on e4 is another powerhouse, controlling key squares and restricting white's pieces. The bishop retreats, but there's nowhere to hide from black's dominant forces. A quiet, precise move. The bishop on f8 has been a silent hero all game, and now it prepares to rejoin the final assault. White's knight jumps to c7, creating a nuisance, but So handles it with ease. This is a classic technique for winning players. Trade pieces. So offers a rook trade to simplify the position and make his advantage even easier to convert. White avoids the trade for now, but black has other ideas. More pressure. Knight to e7 forces another trade. White simply cannot escape the simplification, and the knights come off the board. The position is now crystal clear. Rook recaptures. It's a rook and bishop versus a rook and knight, but black's pieces are far superior, and white's king is still weak. The king tries to find a safer square, but there are none, so patiently improves his position, preparing the final push. The white rook is tied down to defensive duties. The knight begins a new journey, heading towards the king's side where it can create more threats. A small pawn move, but it doesn't change the evaluation of the position. Black fixes the kingside pawns, limiting the mobility of white's king. The bishop shuffles around, but it has no real prospects. Another pawn move, further restricting white and preparing a safe haven for the black king. White's bishop tries to find an active role, but black is in full control. The bishop on g7 is a rock, a key defensive piece that anchors black's position. White is simply shuffling pieces, waiting for the inevitable. The knight lands on d5, another fantastic square. From here, it attacks c3 and eyes the e3 square. The king is forced to move, but it's walking into more danger. And the knight lands on c3, forking the rook and the bishop, a beautiful demonstration of knight geometry. The rook moves, but now black's pieces are completely dominant. The knight is a true octopus, its tentacles reaching all over the board. White defends, but the end is near. A nice little tactical shot. Knight takes g3, wins another pawn and further exposes the white king. White attacks the knight, but it's a futile gesture. The knight retreats to f5, where it continues to control key squares. The rook is trying to create some counterplay, but black is too solid. Knight to d4 with check. The king is being hunted across the board. The king moves, but there's no escape. The knight on e6 is perfectly placed, attacking the bishop and preparing to deliver the final blow. The bishop has to retreat, so brings his bishop into the attack, preparing to create a mating net. A desperate move by white. Knight to f4 with check, forcing the king onto the back rank. The king moves to h2, but it's cornered. And the rook delivers a check on e2. This is the beginning of the end. The king is forced to h1. Knight takes h3. Another pawn falls, and now mate is just a few moves away. A last spiteful check from white. The king easily steps aside. The rook moves, but the threats are too great. The knight on g5 prepares to deliver the final crushing blow. White makes one last move. And knight to e6 is the final nail in the coffin. It attacks the rook on f7 and threatens mate. A truly dominant performance. White captures with check, But after king to g8, the rook on f7 is trapped, and all of white's hopes are extinguished. At this point, Vincent Keymer resigns the game. What an incredible game! We saw positional maneuvering, a shift in initiative, and it all culminated in that absolutely breathtaking rook sacrifice on d2. A true tactical masterpiece from Wesley So. Thanks for joining us on Chess Tactic today, and we'll see you for the next one.